Hi, in this video I'm going to show you what's new in IBM Copy Services Manager 6.1.1. This is an overview chart. We list 7 of the major key features that we're putting into 6.1.1, and then I'll go through them in detail in alternate charts, as well as give you a demo on some of them. The first feature is Hyperswap and HardFreeze enablement on the DS8000 multi-target Metro Mirror and Global Mirror sessions. So we have 2 multi-target MMGM sessions. Both of them have the Hyperswap HardFreeze capability now in 6.1.1. We added support for the target box not requiring the multi-target feature code. There's a DS8000 RPQ, which I'll talk about, that allows you to do migrations to boxes that have multi-target. We have the ability to set up LDAP configuration through the CSM GUI now. We added the ability to set a user-defined delay time for the SVC GM auto restart feature from 6.1.0. We added some historical RPO data being collected for SVC GM with change volume sessions with the ability to export those to a CSV file. We added the ability to use the CSM session name when we're creating the SVC consistency groups. It's been a big pain point for a lot of customers in the past. I'll tell you how that improves now with 6.1.1. And the last one here is the support for external failback on SVC, MM, and GM sessions. And I'll explain to you what the scenarios are there. So first, the Hyperswap and HardFreeze enablement for DS8000 multi-target MM GM sessions. So as many of you probably know, Hyperswap provides the ability that when there's a primary I/O error, with DS8000 and ZOS technology, an automatic swap of the applications occur to the Metro Mirror target. So since there's an MM and GM leg on this, the MM is enabled for Hyperswap, providing that high availability on your production volumes so that in the event of a primary I/O error, you're up and running still, little to no impact to the application. HardFreeze now is same thing as we've had in the past, added now to MMGM, but the HardFreeze, what it is it takes that Metro Mirror configuration, puts it down into ZOS without the Hyperswap capability, but provides that DR capability so that if a disaster level situation occurs, such as losing the pass between the primary and secondary site, the freeze occurs regardless of whether the controlling software CSM is active or not. So you're guaranteed that consistency is maintained there. Both of these features are available in the Metro Mirror Global Mirror and Metro Global Mirror with Practice session. So let me give you a quick demo. This is the new Copy Services Manager GUI. We do have some improvements in look and feel. You'll notice nothing in the way of flow. All the flow is still the same, but some new icons and colors and stuff to be a little bit more usable, a little bit more readable, and some features. I'm going to drill for the Hyperswap stuff. I'm going to drill into, I already have an MMGM session defined. You'll see it's active, running. I am connected to a ZOS system already, and so all I need to do is do the view modify properties. That pops up the properties for them under the H1, H2 options. That's the Metro Mirror leg of this relationship. You'll see now there's a ZOS management set of properties where you can associate it to a system or sysplex and then either enable HardFreeze or manage H1, H2 with Hyperswap. If I check to manage H1, H2 with Hyperswap, you can then choose the various sets of options that will occur for the Hyperswap in the event of a swap condition, so the on configuration errors, on plan Hyperswap errors, etc. Once I say OK, that configuration is now going to get loaded into ZOS, and we went Hyperswap enabled. So just like that, now we're Hyperswap enabled. If we had a primary I/O error, it would actually swap the data to the H2 sets of volumes with little or no impact to the application. Or I can also do the Hyperswap by command if I so chose. I'll show you that here in just a second. All right, commands Hyperswap. The command is Hyperswap to H2. You sure you want a Hyperswap? Say yes. This goes through all the commands under the covers, telling ZOS to do the swap. Swap is occurring. We're handling H1, H3 pairs. And you'll see in a second, we'll go to a target available state. There you go. Now all production is running on H2 because there's a swap. Actual production is running to H2, and we can, once any issues were resolved, or if this was a planned swap, we can just restart replication in the opposite direction. All those pairs are getting reestablished without the full copy. They're all using the DS8000's multi-target capabilities to do failbacks and not full copies. So from H2, all you have to do is a restart, resync, and fairly quickly you're back up and running into a fully hyperswappable state again with H2, H1, H2, H3, both doing their copying. So there you go. We're in a prepared state. We're hyperswap capable now on 2 to 1 and doing global mirror and forming consistency groups on 2 to 3. So that's the Hyperswap HardFreeze enablement. We're going to go on. Again, as I mentioned, we added support for the target box not having a multi-target feature code for the DS8000. Previously, any multi-target sessions within CSM would make sure that any boxes in any of the sites, so H1, H2, H3 site, had the multi-target feature code. And so what we've done is we lifted that restriction. This allows a customer to set up the multi-target sessions with a target box that does not have the multi-target feature code, so that you can migrate to a different box that does have it. Now, the only issue that you might have with that kind of configuration is that it's not meant for a true 3-site DR type case, because the bitmaps between the remote sites aren't being kept if not all boxes have the multi-target feature code. So I would only recommend using this in a migration type case to get to a box that does have multi-target. But all of our multi-target session types do support this. That's Metro Mirror, Metro Mirror, Metro Mirror Global Mirror, and Metro Mirror Global Mirror practice. Right, next is being able to set up LDAP configuration through our CSM GUI. We do allow this in 6.10 and through the CLI. You can set up the LDAP. There's a set of CLI commands. There's make 80 config, that's for the Active Directory, and a make LDAP config for the LDAP configuration. CSM. Let me do a quick demo. So I'm going to go to the Administration tab. And now under Administration, you can see up here server, and it's going to tell you not configured. This means this is your LDAP server. It's not configured yet, so I'm going to click Modify. From there, you get the pop-up for the wizard. This says, right here, you select the authentication method. So let's do an LDAP server. Now, because you can have redundant LDAP servers, we have an add button that lets you specify an LDAP server name. This will be your server hostname IP address and the port number. So I'm going to set up one that LDAP server that we have configured. Next, you need to put in the base DN information. So this is the search base for the users and groups. Let me set up what we have set up in ours. You need to set up the bind DN information, and then lastly the bind password. You also have the option to enable SSL and load a certificate. I don't have that in this case for this connection, but you do have that option. So they have SSL communication to the LDAP server. Before the save button, you'll notice that it's grayed out. We make sure you test it first, so you click the test button once you have things in there. And right now it's setting up that LDAP stuff, doing a quick test, and now the save button is shown. If by any chance the LDAP information you put in was not configured correctly, when we did our query, we do a quick query during the test to see if we can get back any users. If no users are returned, we give you an error message indicating that, so that you can go through and change or modify anything that you might need to try to make sure that the base and bind information is correct. We do allow you to still continue on and save it if you need to, but the point of the test there is to make sure that we do pull back names during the configuration. So I'm going to save it. Now you see that we're saved successfully, and that little message there. And now to show you that work, I'm going to add access. I can now search for users or groups. I'm just going to do a splat for the wildcard. You can see we support wildcards. Click Next. You'll see that there's a number of, these are from LDAP users. You see LDAP users, LDAP groups. So I'm going to choose an LDAP user, CSM admin user. You can choose the access level, so monitor, administrator, operator. Choose administrator. Just a confirmation panel. Click Next. Now, CSM admin user can log into the CSM GUI using their LDAP user ID and password, and they'll be set to go. Next one. All right, so we allow user to find delay time on an SVC auto restart now. So for those of you who have looked at what was new in the Copy Servers Manager content for 6.1.0, we added the ability for SVC GM sessions, if they hit a 1720-1920 suspension error code, we have an option in the CSM GUI that now can cause the session to do an auto restart. So with this release with 6.1.1, we've added an improvement to that where a user can actually set a delay time such that the CSM server session does not start that session right away. Some of the scenarios for this might be if they might want a little bit of time after the suspension error to let things cool down. IO just calm down before they restart, so they'll add a delay time there. Or there's cases where customers might have a whole number of SVC sessions, and they don't want to they all hit the 1720-1920 around the same time. They don't want them all to restart exactly at the same time, so they'll put a different delay time on each so that the restarts become staggered. I have a session running. Here's the global mirror change volume session. It's already in a prepared state, and so I am going to the properties, view modify properties, H1, H2. I can enable that automatic restart. You get the warning that we mentioned for the 6.1.0 release that when we automatically do the restart, the reseek process will begin, and so you need to be warned that if you use this feature and the disaster occurs before we're fully sync again, you might not be consistent at the remote site. But if you choose to do this, we will have future enhancements to try to minimize that impact. But if you choose to use this feature, then the delay time is right below it. You can choose any number of seconds up to the 43,200 that we show there. So if I say 120 seconds, 2 minutes, all that tells this session that once it gets a 1720, 1920 suspension, it'll wait that 2 minutes before attempting that auto restart. I don't have the auto restart going, so right now this option is just set, it's running, you're good to go, and that'll kick in the event of that 1720, 1920. All right, the next feature is the export of the historical RPO data I talked about. So today, CSM with DS8000 collects a lot of GM information and allows you to export that GM information to a CSV file. Well, we've added that same feature into SVC, so that with SVC GM with change volumes, we store historical information for the RPO for the session at by default a 30-second interval, and allow you now to use either the export global mirror data link within the GUI or an export GM data command in the CLI to export that data to a CSV file. So let's just jump right to back to my GM with change volume session. How you would do this in the GUI is under actions, we have this export, and under there now you have that export global mirror data, which is now available for the SVC global mirror change volume session. You click on it, you can see that there's different export types. In this case, we're doing RPO. The LLSS out of sync is only for DS8000, so choose RPO. You can choose a date range up to that 31 minimum, and then you say OK, and we'll build that CSV file for you. So just to jump into there real quick so you can see what it looks like. This is the main file, gives you the query time, session name, role pair name, consistency group name, the query interval, data exposure, etc. So now you can take that file, import it into a spreadsheet, and start tracking your RPO for that global mirror change volume session over time. All right. Next feature is that the ability to use the CSM session name when creating the SVC consistency groups. So this has been a big pain point for a lot of customers in the past. When CSM starts up an SVC session, we create a consistency group on the SVC storewide system, but we don't provide it a consistency group name. And so when you do that, the SVC auto creates a name, and that's what gets used. So we have a map internally between our session, the CSM session, and the SVC consistency group. But if a customer were to go to the SVC GUI or SVC CLI themselves, there is no tie there. They can't see which session is tied to which, and thus this feature allows us to do that tying. So we've added it because there's a 15-character limit on an SVC consistency group name. We now have that within the CSM session name when you're creating an SVC session type. And so through the GUI, you'll be limited to that 15 characters, but as long as you have it under that 15 characters, we will use that name when we build a consistency group on the SVC so that now the two will match. So in this case, you can see below, it shows you an example of what happens when you specify more than 15 characters, but let's go see that in real life. So I'm going to go back over here to my session, to my CSM server. I'm going to create a new session. Choose a session type, and you can see that when I add something that goes over 15 characters, we get that error, session name is limited to 15 characters. But in this case where this session is, this was under 15 characters, and you'll see that we also display what the consistency group name on that hardware is. So we were able to establish GMCV as this consistency group name. So if you were to go to one of the SVC APIs, the GUI, CLI, etc., you would see the GMCV consistency group on there in order to map it back to the CSM session. All right. Next feature is the ability to support external failback for SVC, MM, and GM sessions. So what this is CSM already had the ability to recognize external failovers. So this is when you actually do the commands to allow the secondaries to be writable. We did that previously for other external tools. We've gotten recently more requirements so that we can handle the external failback in the opposite direction as well. So what happens is if a CSM session is running, say, from the H1, H2 direction, we will get an event that tells us that it's suspended and failed over, but now we'll also get that event that tells us it's failed back in the opposite direction, and so that CSM session will go from that H1, H2 direction automatically to show in the 2-to-1 direction with the correct state. So examples when you might use this is integrating CSM, where you can create the setup and the consistency group, monitor the relationships, all that stuff, but use another tool like VMware SRM to handle some of the automation of your applications during the actual site switch. So VMware SRM will be tied to those consistency groups and do that failover, failback. And now Copy Services Manager will see those changes and react accordingly so that the two stay in sync. And that's comes to the conclusion of my video here. Hope you like what's new in 6.1. Look forward to future enhancements. Here's some important links that you might use, and I thank you for your time.